The howl split the mountain before anyone saw the king. Not a warning. A command. If the runaway Omega was not returned to the capital before moonrise, every pack surrounding the valley would be ordered to hunt her, and there would be nowhere left to hide. Before you discover why an entire kingdom fell silent when one broken Omega spoke a single word, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us where you are listening from. Now return to the day tradition met a courage no one expected. The valley of Frost Hollow was surrounded by hundreds of wolves. Pack warriors formed an unbroken circle. At their center stood Alpha King Damon Blackthorn. Tall, unshakable. His black royal cloak moved gently in the wind as golden eyes searched the quiet clearing. Across from him stood the woman every alpha expected to kneel. Lyra Wintervale. Her gray dress was faded. Old scars crossed one wrist where years of abuse had left permanent reminders. Her shoulders were thin. Her posture was not. The invisible pull of the mate bond surged between them like lightning. Every warrior felt it. Every elder recognized it. The legendary Alpha King had found his destined mate. An elder stepped forward. Omega Lyra, by the ancient laws, you are commanded to accept your Alpha. The valley held its breath. Lyra looked directly into Damon's eyes. There was no hatred, no fear, only quiet certainty. Then she answered, "No." The single word echoed across the valley. Gasps spread through the gathered packs. And Omega had not merely rejected an alpha. She had refused the Alpha King himself. And for the very first time, Damon realized that winning a kingdom would be far easier than earning the trust of the woman destiny had chosen for him. No one followed her. Not because they respected her decision, because they were too stunned to move. The valley remained frozen long after Lyra disappeared beyond the pine trees. Warriors stared at one another in disbelief. Pack elders whispered in anxious circles. Even the Alpha King remained silent. No Omega had ever rejected the mate bond so calmly. No one understood why. Only Lyra did. Because she had already learned the hardest lesson of her life. Sometimes the person offering protection arrived years too late. Long before anyone called her courageous, they called her worthless. Lyra had been born into the Iron Ridge Pack, where Omegas existed only to serve. She woke before sunrise. She worked until long after darkness covered the mountains. Cooking, cleaning, gathering water through winter storms, treating injuries she was never allowed to complain about. Her mistakes earned punishment. Her silence earned suspicion. Her kindness earned exploitation. Every scar across her arms carried a memory she never wanted to relive. The deepest wounds, however, had never touched her skin. They lived inside her heart. Every promise that someone would protect her. Every promise that was broken. When she turned 19, the Pack Beta announced she would be claimed during the winter bonding ceremony. No one asked what she wanted. No one wondered whether she was afraid. And Omega's future, they insisted, belonged to stronger wolves. That night, Lyra fled. She crossed frozen rivers, climbed snow-covered cliffs, survived 3 days without food. By the 4th morning, exhausted and barely conscious, she collapsed beneath the roots of an ancient white oak. When she finally opened her eyes again, an elderly healer named Mara sat beside her. The old woman offered warm soup before asking a single question. "Would you like to stay?" Not, who owns you? Not, what pack are you from? Only, would you like to stay? Lyra cried harder than she had in years, because it was the first choice anyone had ever given her. Mara's cottage stood deep inside an abandoned valley, hidden from the old trade routes. The roof leaked whenever spring storms arrived. The garden was small. The winters were harsh, but no one shouted. No one raised a hand. No one measured another wolf's worth by rank. For the first time, Lyra experienced something she had never known. Peace. She learned herbal medicine, midwifery, bone setting, how to grow mountain herbs that survived freezing temperatures. Travelers occasionally found the tiny cottage while searching for help. Some carried injured children, others carried sick elders. Many carried broken hearts. Mara never turned anyone away. Neither did Lyra. Years passed. One abandoned cottage slowly became 2, then 4, then 10. A carpenter whose daughter had escaped abuse built wooden homes without accepting payment. A widowed blacksmith forged farming tools instead of weapons. A former pack teacher opened a tiny school where orphaned pups learned to read beside children from ordinary families. No one planned to create a village. It simply happened. Hope attracted those who had nowhere else to go. Someone eventually carved a wooden sign near the entrance. Sanctuary of Dawn. The name remained. So did the people. Not every resident was an Omega. There were elderly wolves abandoned by ambitious relatives. Young warriors permanently injured during border wars. Children left behind after rogue attacks. Single fathers, widows, travelers with nowhere to sleep. Lyra welcomed them all. One simple rule hung above the community dining hall. No one here earns kindness. It is given freely. Visitors often stood silently before reading those words again. Many had forgotten such a world was even possible. One rainy afternoon, an elderly storyteller arrived carrying a weathered leather journal. In exchange for a bowl of soup, he offered a forgotten legend. He claimed that centuries before the first Alpha Kingdom had risen, another ruler united the wolves. Not an Alpha, an Omega Queen. According to the fading journal, she never conquered a single pack. She healed them instead. The old man smiled. History remembers kings. But sometimes, the world survives because of women no history book bothers to name. After finishing his meal, he quietly left before sunrise. The journal remained behind. Inside its final page appeared only one sentence. When compassion becomes stronger than fear, the true throne awakens. Lyra never fully understood its meaning. Still, she kept the journal safely stored inside the sanctuary library. Something about those words refused to leave her heart. Far away in the royal capital, Alpha King Damon stood inside the hall of pack leaders. The chamber buzzed with angry voices. High Alpha Garrick Stonefang slammed both hands against the council table. A runaway Omega publicly humiliated the crown. Another Alpha nodded. She must be returned immediately. Lady Celine Ashmore stepped gracefully into the center of the chamber. The packs are already whispering. If one Omega refuses the Alpha King without consequence, others will begin questioning the old laws. The room fell uncomfortably quiet. That possibility frightened them more than rebellion. It threatened obedience itself. Damon listened without interruption. Finally, he spoke. Has Lyra attacked anyone? No. Has she stolen land? No. Has she declared war? Again. No. He slowly rose from his chair. Then the only crime she has committed is refusing a life someone else chose for her. The council erupted in protest. Garrick pointed accusingly toward the throne. Your Majesty, you sound as though you admire her. Damon answered without hesitation. I admire courage. Days later, a royal scout returned from the northern mountains. He bowed deeply before the king. Your Majesty, I found Sanctuary of Dawn. Damon looked up. What did you see? The scout smiled faintly. I expected fugitives. I found families. I expected fear. I found children laughing. I expected rebellion. I found people rebuilding one another. He paused, and I saw Lady Lyra. What was she doing? The scout's answer came without delay. She was repairing the roof of an elderly widow before the storm arrived. No ceremony, no guards, no throne, just quiet service. For reasons Damon could not explain, his chest tightened. Perhaps strength had worn a different face all along, and somewhere deep inside him, the ancient wolf stirred, not because destiny demanded possession, but because it recognized a heart unlike any it had ever known. The rain began before sunrise, soft at first, then steady enough to wrap the sanctuary in a silver curtain that blurred the surrounding forest. Alpha King Damon Blackthorn dismissed his royal escort a mile before reaching the valley. I will continue alone. Captain Elias frowned. Your Majesty, High Alpha Garrick has already declared Sanctuary a threat. It is not safe. Damon fastened his cloak against the cold wind. I am not going there as a king. He looked toward the distant rooftops. I am going there as the man she refused. Without waiting for another objection, he disappeared into the rain. Sanctuary of Dawn looked nothing like the stories spreading through the capital. The council had described it as a breeding ground for rebellion, a settlement where Omegas plotted against Alpha rule. Instead, he found children planting wildflowers beside a weathered fence, an elderly wolf patiently teaching two orphaned boys how to repair a broken wagon wheel, a young beta carrying water for an injured Omega without embarrassment. No one bowed when Damon entered. Most simply smiled politely before returning to their work. Respect here was not demanded. It was earned. Near the community garden, Lyra knelt beside a frightened little girl whose ankle had been wrapped in fresh bandages. Does it still hurt? Lyra asked gently. A little. Then we will walk together until it hurts less. The child nodded bravely. Lyra offered her hand. No promises, no speeches, just quiet presence. Damon watched from several yards away. Something inside him shifted. He had spent years ruling thousands. She changed lives one person at a time. Then the wind changed. A gentle breeze carried the scent of rain-soaked lavender, fresh cedar, mountain herbs drying in the morning sun, and beneath it all, her. The fragrance struck Damon with overwhelming force. His breath caught. Electric warmth exploded through every nerve. His heartbeat pounded against his ribs. Deep inside, the ancient Alpha that had remained silent for years suddenly surged forward. Mine. The word did not sound like a thought. It sounded like instinct older than language itself. A deep, primal purr vibrated inside his chest. Low, powerful, impossible to suppress. The mate bond awakened completely, not because he wished it to, because truth could no longer be denied. Across the garden, Lyra froze. The basket of herbs slipped from her hands. Bundles of rosemary scattered across the damp earth. Warmth rushed through her body like living lightning. The familiar pull she had buried beneath years of pain returned with breathtaking intensity. Her wolf lifted its head, not with excitement, with quiet recognition. She slowly turned. Their eyes met. For one endless moment, the world disappeared. The laughter of children faded. The rain became distant. There were only two souls connected by an ancient promise neither had been able to erase. Damon took one careful step forward. I came without soldiers. Lyra looked beyond him. You also came without your crown. I wanted nothing standing between us. She folded her arms gently across her chest. There are still many things standing between us. He nodded. I know. I do not expect forgiveness. Good. Her answer was calm. Because I cannot give something I do not yet have. The honesty hurt, but it also brought unexpected relief. For the first time, no one was hiding behind titles. A small voice interrupted the silence. Miss Lyra! A young boy ran toward them carrying a carved wooden wolf missing one leg. I broke it. Lyra knelt immediately. We can fix it. She accepted the toy as though it were priceless. Damon watched her carefully shave a small piece of cedar into the shape of a new leg. Several children gathered around. Within minutes, the little wolf stood again. The boy's face lit up with joy. You always fix everything. Lyra smiled softly. Not everything. But we can always begin. The words lingered in Damon's heart. He realized she spoke about far more than toys. Later that afternoon, they walked together beside the valley stream while children played nearby. Neither rushed the conversation. Finally, Damon broke the silence. I have replayed that day 1,000 times. The day I accepted the council's decision. Lyra skipped a small stone across the water. I replayed it too. I kept asking myself whether I should have fought harder. She looked at the flowing stream. Then I realized something. What? If love survives only when someone begs for it, it was never love. Damon lowered his eyes. You deserved someone brave enough to choose you. I deserved someone who chose himself first. She turned toward him. The council did not force your decision. They only made it easier. The truth struck harder than accusation ever could. He did not defend himself. Because she was right. As evening approached, Captain Elias arrived at the edge of Sanctuary with urgent news. He dismounted before reaching Damon. Your Majesty, we intercepted messages between the northern packs. Damon immediately recognized the seriousness in his voice. What happened? Garrick has united 12 Alpha leaders. Lyra's expression remained calm. For what purpose? Captain Elias hesitated. They have signed a declaration. He unfolded a sealed parchment. The document declares Sanctuary of Dawn an illegal settlement. Silence settled over the valley. Elias continued. They intend to march here within 3 days, to arrest every resident. And if anyone resists, his voice grew quieter. The order authorizes lethal force. Children continued laughing only a short distance away, completely unaware that powerful leaders had already decided their fate. Damon slowly folded the parchment, then looked at Lyra. I cannot undo the years that hurt you. I cannot erase every law that failed you. But this... He looked toward the families filling the valley. This I will not allow. Golden light slowly ignited within his eyes, not with rage, with resolve. His wolf no longer demanded that he claim his mate. It demanded something far greater. Protect her world, even if it meant tearing down the throne that had once protected his own. The first war horn echoed across the mountains before dawn. Then another. Then 12 more. The sound rolled through the valley like thunder, sending birds into the sky and silencing every conversation inside Sanctuary. Children stopped playing. Gardeners lowered their tools. The elderly quietly ushered the youngest residents toward the stone meeting hall. No one panicked. They had prepared for this day. Not because they wanted war, because they knew compassion would eventually threaten those who ruled through fear. From the highest ridge overlooking Sanctuary, 12 banners appeared. Each belonged to one of the oldest Alpha packs. Thousands of warriors marched shoulder to shoulder beneath black and crimson standards. Steel armor reflected the rising sun. Spears stretched across the mountainside like an endless forest. At the center rode High Alpha Garrick Stonefang. Beside him sat Lady Celine Ashmore, dressed in silver ceremonial robes, her expression calm and victorious. Behind them followed the council's remaining elders. They had not come to negotiate. They had come to make an example. Inside Sanctuary, no one reached for weapons. Lyra stood in the middle of the village square, surrounded by frightened children. She knelt before them. Listen carefully. If anything happens, you run toward the eastern forest. The healers will meet you there. One little girl grabbed Lyra's hand. Are you coming too? Lyra smiled gently. I promise I will do everything I can. The child hugged her tightly before joining the others. Damon watched the exchange from several steps away. She thought about everyone else before herself. Again. It was who she had always been. The army stopped just beyond the entrance bridge. Garrick's voice echoed across the valley. Lyra Wintervale! You stand accused of encouraging rebellion against Alpha authority. You have one opportunity. Dissolve this sanctuary. Return every runaway Omega, and publicly reject your false teachings. Silence answered him. Finally, Lyra stepped forward alone. I taught abandoned children how to read. I fed hungry families. I healed injured wolves. She looked directly at Garrick. Tell me, which of those is rebellion? The question spread across both armies. Several younger warriors lowered their eyes. Even among Garrick's forces, some could not answer. Lady Celine urged her horse forward. You poisoned them with dangerous ideas. She pointed toward Sanctuary. You convinced Omegas they deserve choices. Lyra's voice never rose. They do. You convinced warriors to serve beside them. They chose kindness. You convinced children they have equal value. They always did. Every accusation became another truth. The silence behind Garrick grew heavier. Garrick's face darkened. He drew his enormous battle axe. If old traditions must drown in blood, so be it. He lifted the weapon toward Sanctuary. Advance. Thousands of armored warriors surged forward. The ground shook beneath their charge. Children screamed. Dust filled the valley. Damon stepped between the army and Sanctuary. Alone. Captain Elias immediately joined him. Then the Royal Guard. Without command. Several neutral pack leaders quietly walked forward as well. 1, then 3, then 11. Garrick frowned. What are you doing? An elderly Alpha answered first. I came here expecting traitors. He looked toward Sanctuary. I found families. Another leader removed the insignia from his armor. I will not attack children. A third planted his sword into the earth. I refuse this order. One after another, warriors crossed the invisible line, not toward Garrick, toward Damon, toward Sanctuary, toward conscience. Fury twisted Garrick's expression. Cowards! He slammed his axe against the ground. You have forgotten who gives you authority. Damon answered quietly. No. We finally remembered. Golden light ignited inside the Alpha King's eyes. His cloak lifted, although no wind blew. The mountain itself seemed to hold its breath. For years, he had used his strength to preserve laws written by frightened rulers. Today, he would use it to protect those laws had abandoned. His alpha wolf rose completely. Ancient, immense, unyielding. The alpha aura erupted. Not as violence, as truth. Invisible waves spread across the valley. Trees bent, stone cracked. Every banner snapped violently. Thousands of wolves felt the overwhelming presence of an alpha whose authority no longer came from inherited power, but from moral conviction. The pressure reached Garrick's army. Rows of warriors staggered. Spears slipped from trembling hands. Helmets struck the ground. One after another, they knelt. Not because Damon demanded obedience, because their wolves refused to fight against justice. Only Garrick remained standing. His crimson aura exploded outward in desperate resistance. You think compassion makes you stronger? He roared. It makes you weak. He charged. The battle axe descended with enough force to split stone. Damon caught the strike with his sword. The impact echoed through the valley. Garrick attacked again. And again. Wild. Brutal. Relentless. Each blow carried decades of pride. Each block carried quiet certainty. Damon never attacked first. He simply refused to yield. Nearby, Lady Selene quietly slipped toward Sanctuary. Hidden beneath her cloak rested an enchanted crystal dagger. If the woman dies, she whispered, the movement dies with her. She rushed toward Lyra. Captain Elias tried to intercept. Too late. The blade flashed, then stopped. Not because Elias reached her, because Lyra never stepped back. She simply looked into Selene's frightened eyes. I forgive you. The words struck harder than steel. Selene froze. Her hand trembled violently. The dagger slipped from her fingers. It shattered against the stone path. Years of hatred collapsed beneath one act of unexpected mercy. She fell to her knees, sobbing. I never knew another way. Lyra quietly helped her stand. You do now. Behind them, Garrick launched one final attack. He raised the massive axe high above his head. With a roar, he brought it down toward Damon. The Alpha King stepped aside. The axe buried itself deep inside the earth. Before Garrick could recover, Damon gently struck the wooden handle with the flat of his blade. The weapon splintered into two pieces. Silence fell. The strongest symbol of Garrick's authority lay broken at his feet. Damon placed the tip of his sword against the ground instead of Garrick's throat. It ends here. Garrick looked around. His army had surrendered. His allies had abandoned him. Even the wolves within his own ranks refused to stand beside him any longer. For the first time, he understood. Fear could command obedience, but it could never earn loyalty. Royal guards stepped forward and peacefully placed enchanted restraints around his wrists. No cheers erupted. No celebration followed. Only quiet relief. Because the greatest victory had not been won with claws. It had been won when countless wolves chose courage over tradition. And as the morning sunlight illuminated Sanctuary, the old alpha laws that had justified generations of suffering no longer ruled the kingdom. They had finally begun to burn. The battle was over. No victory songs echoed through the valley, no triumphant banners rose above Sanctuary. Instead, hammers replaced swords, healers replaced warriors. The same hands that had defended the village now repaired broken roofs, lifted fallen beams, and comforted frightened children. That was the future Lyra had always imagined, a world where strength existed to restore rather than destroy. High Alpha Garrick Stonefang stood before the Grand Assembly in enchanted restraints. The ancient Hall of Packs had never been so full. Every Alpha, every Beta, every Elder, every representative from the neighboring territories had gathered to witness the judgment. The shattered remains of Garrick's battle axe rested upon the marble floor, a reminder that fear had finally met its limit. High Elder Cassius slowly unrolled the recovered council records. His weathered voice echoed through the chamber. For decades, false traditions were used to justify cruelty. He placed another document beside it. Runaway Omegas were hunted without trial. Another followed. Children born without status were denied protection. A fourth. Entire villages disappeared because compassion was mistaken for rebellion. The chamber remained silent. No one challenged the evidence. The truth had survived. Garrick lifted his head. I protected order. His voice carried no remorse. Without absolute authority, every pack will fall into chaos. Damon looked directly at him. Authority without justice is not order. It is fear wearing a crown. Garrick laughed bitterly. You sound more like an Omega than a king. Damon answered calmly. Then perhaps kings should have listened to Omegas much sooner. Several Alpha leaders slowly lowered their heads, not in humiliation, in agreement. Lady Celine Ashmore stepped forward voluntarily. Gone were the jeweled gowns and polished confidence that had once defined her. She wore a simple gray dress identical to those worn by the Sanctuary healers. I spread lies. She spoke without excuse. I believed power mattered more than people. She turned toward Lyra. I cannot erase what I helped create. But I ask permission to spend whatever years remain repairing the lives I helped break. The chamber waited. Lyra studied her quietly, then nodded. Redemption begins with responsibility, not words. Tears filled Celine's eyes. I understand. High Elder Cassius struck the ceremonial staff against the marble floor. The judgment of the Grand Assembly is unanimous. High Alpha Garrick Stonefang is permanently stripped of every title, territory, military authority, and hereditary privilege. He shall spend the remainder of his life serving within the Valley Restoration Corps, rebuilding the villages destroyed under his command. The elder looked across the assembly. No wolf shall ever again rule through fear alone. Applause did not follow, only quiet acceptance. Justice had spoken. As evening settled across Sanctuary, the villagers gathered beside a peaceful lake illuminated by hundreds of floating lanterns. Children laughed. Families shared simple meals. Musicians played soft melodies beneath the ancient pine trees. For the first time in many years, no one looked over their shoulder in fear. Damon stood alone near the water's edge. His royal armor remained scarred from the battle. Several bandages crossed his shoulder and ribs where Garrick's final strikes had landed. Dry blood still marked the edge of his sleeve. Yet none of those wounds troubled him. Only one question remained. Would Lyra ever believe that the man standing before her was no longer the king who had protected a broken system? She approached quietly. Neither of them spoke at first. The lake reflected the full moon between them. Finally, Damon reached toward the golden circlet resting upon his head. He removed it, then unclasped the heavy royal cloak from his shoulders. Finally, he laid both upon the grass. The symbols of his authority no longer stood between them. Without hesitation, Alpha King Damon Blackthorn lowered himself onto one knee. The movement silenced the entire shoreline. Conversations stopped. Music faded. Even the evening breeze seemed to pause. The most powerful Alpha in the kingdom bowed his head before the Omega who had once refused him. His voice trembled. Years ago, I believed protecting the throne meant protecting the kingdom. I was wrong. He looked up into Lyra's eyes. The throne survived. You did not. Pain tightened his expression. I cannot return the years stolen from you. I cannot erase every scar. I cannot ask you to forget. He swallowed hard. So I will not ask. Instead, I ask only for the opportunity to spend the rest of my life proving that love without respect is never worthy of either. A tear slipped quietly down Lyra's cheek. Not because every wound had healed, because someone had finally acknowledged them. Without excuses, without conditions, without demanding forgiveness. She slowly knelt until they stood eye to eye. My scars are part of my story, she whispered gently. I will never pretend they did not happen. Damon nodded. They should never have happened. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Lyra reached forward. She did not lift the crown. She lifted the man. I cannot promise trust overnight, she said softly. But I can promise this. If we build something together, it will belong to every wolf who was once told they had no place in this world. A warm smile finally reached Damon's eyes. Then let us build exactly that. The mate bond flared between them, not as possession, not as command, as partnership. Around them, the gathered wolves began applauding, not because a king had found his Luna, but because two wounded souls had chosen healing over pride. And for the first time in generations, hope felt stronger than fear. Spring arrived quietly. The snow melted from the mountain paths. Wildflowers returned to the valley where soldiers had once prepared for battle. Sanctuary of Dawn no longer looked like a refuge built for survivors. It looked like the beginning of a different future. New cottages stood where empty fields had once stretched. A larger school welcomed children from every neighboring pack. The healing house had doubled in size. Travelers arrived not because they were fleeing fear, but because they wanted to learn how the little valley had accomplished what generations of rulers could not. No one asked which pack they belonged to before opening the gate. No one asked whether they were Alpha, Beta, or Omega before offering a meal. The old sign still stood beside the entrance. Its weathered words had become the heart of an entire movement. No one here earns kindness. It is given freely. Inside the royal hall, another gathering of pack leaders had begun. This assembly felt nothing like the one Damon had known for years. The great throne remained empty. Instead, a large circular table filled the center of the chamber. Every voice could be heard. Every proposal could be challenged. Every pack, regardless of size, held representation. Some of the older alphas resisted the changes. Others embraced them immediately. Progress was slower than Damon sometimes wished, but it was real. High Elder Cassius smiled as he reviewed the newest charter. The right to refuse a mate bond, the protection of abandoned children, independent healers serving every territory, equal inheritance regardless of secondary rank. One by one, the reforms became law. Not because a king commanded them, because enough wolves finally understood why they mattered. Damon spent fewer days inside the capital than anyone expected. Whenever court business allowed, he returned to Sanctuary. Sometimes he helped repair fences. Sometimes he carried lumber beside ordinary builders. Sometimes children simply convinced him to join their games. The Alpha King discovered something no battlefield had ever taught him. Respect grew naturally when people saw your hands willing to work. One afternoon, a young boy asked him, "Your Majesty, why do you keep chopping firewood?" Damon laughed. "Because winter never cares who wears a crown." The workers around him smiled. So did the boy. Lyra never accepted the title others tried to give her. Some called her the Queen of the New Age. Others called her the Mother of Sanctuary. She accepted neither. "I am simply a healer," she answered every time. "If people leave here believing they matter, that is enough." Her greatest joy remained the smallest moments. Watching a frightened child laugh for the first time, seeing an injured warrior walk without pain, receiving letters from distant villages that had opened shelters of their own. Compassion had become contagious, and unlike fear, no army could stop it. Months later, the elderly storyteller returned. His beard had grown even whiter. The same worn leather journal rested beneath his arm. Lyra welcomed him with warm soup. The old man smiled as children played nearby. "You found the meaning." Lyra tilted her head. The meaning. He opened the journal to its final page. When compassion becomes stronger than fear, the true throne awakens. He gently closed the book. I spent 40 years believing those words described a palace. His eyes wandered across the sanctuary. I was wrong. He pointed toward the families sharing supper together. This is the throne. Before sunrise the next morning, he quietly continued his journey once again. No one ever learned his true name, yet the lesson he left behind remained. On the anniversary of Sanctuary's founding, wolves gathered from every corner of the kingdom. Some had once fought for Garrick, some had once hidden from him, now they stood together beneath the same open sky. There were no military parades, no displays of power. Instead, children planted a young oak tree in the center of the valley. Each family added a handful of soil. Each elder poured a cup of water over its roots. Each child tied a simple ribbon to one of its branches. Damon looked toward Lyra. "What should we call it?" She smiled. "The promise tree." "What promise?" She watched the children laughing beneath the afternoon sun. "That no wolf will ever again have to earn the right to belong." Years passed. The oak grew tall. The sanctuary expanded into a thriving town. Neighboring packs created schools based on its example. Healers traveled freely across old borders. The cruel laws that had once governed generations became stories told only so children would understand why they must never return. Visitors often asked where the Great Revolution had truly begun. Some believed it started when Garrick fell. Others believed it began when Damon changed. They were both mistaken. It began in a quiet mountain valley. The moment one broken Omega looked into the eyes of the most powerful Alpha alive and calmly said, "No." Because that single word was never an act of rebellion. It was the first honest step toward a world where dignity belonged to everyone. And in the years that followed, wolves would remember many kings, many battles, many victories. But above all, they remembered the woman who proved that the strongest heart in the kingdom did not wear armor. It simply refused to surrender its compassion. If Lyra's journey reminded you that true strength begins with compassion, we hope you'll take a moment to support the channel by liking this video and subscribing for more unforgettable werewolf romance stories. Tell us in the comments, what was the most powerful moment in Lyra's journey? We read your comments every day, and your support helps this community continue to grow. Thank you for spending your time with us. Whether you're listening in the morning, during a long drive, or before falling asleep tonight, we hope this story leaves you with one simple reminder. The people who change the world are not always the loudest. Sometimes they are simply the ones who refuse to stop choosing kindness. Until our next story, take care of yourself, take care of those you love, and may peace always find its way to your heart.